Hi, it's Nikki here from Happy Hormones for Life, and today I've got the lovely and good friend Caroline Ferguson with me. She's a mindset trainer, and I've known you for quite a while, Caroline, and I think one of the first things that we talked about when we first met was how you completely changed the way you felt about your body, literally in an instant. Could you tell us a little bit more about how you did that and what actually happened?
Hi, Nikki. It's really good to be here. Thank you for inviting me on. Yes, I kind of hit a big milestone in my life. It was my 50th birthday, and I realized that I needed to do something that added value because I didn't feel that my previous work as a business comms person had really changed anybody's life for the better or made any kind of difference. There was no legacy to it. So I started again, really. I retrained as a cognitive behavioral hypnotherapist. And that absolutely scratched the itch that I'd always had, this feeling that, there must be something more. I know I was born for something more. And it really hit that spot for me. And while I was training, I was talking to a colleague one day, and we were just having a bit of a moan about things in general. One of my fellow trainees, one of my fellow students, and we were talking about bodies, and I was saying, oh, I don't like this bit, and that bit doesn't work properly, and this bit's really, I cover that bit up. And I was just talking about my body as if it was this bunch of bits that didn't work or that I didn't like. And it was a him, he said to me, gosh, listen to you, have you heard yourself? And it just hit me like this blinding flash of how I was sitting there picking holes in myself and, being intensely critical. And I'd always been like that about my body. I'd always felt like that it was somehow substandard and there was shame attached to it. And it was just this absolute flash of realization that this is not a bunch of bits that I don't like, that are substandard. This is my home, and it's a flipping miracle. The fact that it breathes without me having to do anything, and it walks without me having to tell it to, and it just does all these extraordinary things, and it keeps me upright, and it helps, it sleeps, and it digests, and it bleeds, and all this amazing stuff. This is not just this bunch of substandard bits. It's my miraculous home. It's my home for the rest of my life, and I can't move out. So how does it serve me or anyone else for me to be, just criticizing all the time and to feel ashamed of it? And the other thing was, how can I ever show up to work for women with any integrity if I show up feeling like this? It would, and one of my values, I did quite a lot of work around my values, because, we tend to think we know what's important to us, but actually a lot of the stuff we're carrying around with us, we've inherited from other people. It's other people's values. It's only when we really do the work for ourselves, we understand it's important to us. And a really big one for me, and getting bigger by the day, actually, it used to be number 5 on my list of values, it's now number 2, is honor. And honor is about respect for myself and for others. It's about showing up with integrity, being authentic, being honest. And I just thought, I can't show up with any honor to work with women when I feel like this. And that was it. That whole idea of this is my home for the rest of my life, and I can't move out. And this idea of showing up with honor just kind of came together. And I just thought, how does it serve me to criticize it, to be ashamed of it? I should be trying to make this the best home that it can be for me, not comparing it to other people's homes, but my home. And that is about nurturing it, looking after it. And it really completely transformed how I felt in that instant. And yes, I've had moments since then where I thought, oh, I could do with losing a bit of weight. I could do with getting fitter. But there's no shame in it. There's no dislike in it. There's no self-criticism. It's just an observation that, right, my home could be in better shape right now. And it's a wonderful incentive to do something about it. And I'm just so grateful that that realization has landed fully and has stayed with me. And it does mean that I'm happy to work with other women around body mindset issues without feeling any sense of being a fraud or shamed. So yeah, it was a big moment.
It's incredible to hear that, because actually I totally resonate with everything you've said. And I think most women will have some degree of, well, ranging from mild to quite extreme, a degree of, looking in the mirror and not liking what they see, being very frustrated and stressed around how they look. And all of that what is that to do with? You've worked with a lot of women on this. What is that to do with? I think it's a lot to do with society, but what else? Where's that shame come from?
It's to do with expectations, to do with society, to do with the messages we are bombarded with every day, to do with the way that we're brought up and the way our mothers were brought up and our grandmothers. And that, things have changed so radically just in the last 30 years, never mind, the last 100 years. And I think that we're not taught acceptance, self-acceptance, and it's one of the most valuable life skills that we can have. What we're taught is to compare ourselves to other people and to completely unattainable standards of physical condition and beauty. And it's just going to get radically worse now with all the AI imagery around, all the deep fakery. We're never going to know what's real or not, never. So we just have to do the inner work and build a robust sense of who we are, an acceptance of who we are, and to be able to understand where our desires and shames and whatever comes from, to be able to come back to this robust base, this solid base, because we are the only things that can be solid in this shifting world. So we need to learn, and we're never taught. We're never taught that unless we have parents who work at it when we're children, who teach us that self-acceptance, which is very different from teaching us unrealistic views of ourselves and arrogance, because I see a lot of that as well. But it's about coming home to us, that concept of home being us and self-acceptance.
Yeah. Oh, this speaks to me so much because, I don't know if you know, but my story starts when I was about 7. I was sent to Weight Watchers for kids at 7 years old. So that already, very early on, I was told that my body wasn't right.
Yeah.
Wasn't
That's
normal,
right.
needed to be fixed, even though I was very healthy. So I've gone through life, obviously very concerned about my weight going up and down. And it's actually one of the reasons I'm talking to you now, actually, is because I'm starting to realize that too, about, because I guess in my 40s, when I was going through my hormone issues, I was still very much concerned about how I looked and the weight issue. So I did my nutrition qualification with one eye on, well, I know how to, I'm going to know how to never put weight on, and I'm always going to be slim and blah blah blah. But actually, as I come into my 50s, mid 50s now, my body is completely different to how it was then, and it's only just now that I'm starting to accept it, because I've fought it all this time. And
yeah, I mean, that midlife shift is so radical, and then from then on, the aging is really catching up with us as well. So we're having to deal not just with the hormonal changes and the physical changes that come with menopause, but also the aging, the changes in our skin, the changes in the volume of our face. They're said for quite a long time, but actually to look good when we're older, we need to be a bit fat. We need to retain that kind of juiciness, and we can't get that by being ultra slim, because we do lose fat, we do lose volume. Everything starts heading south, and we have to come to terms with that as well. And if we fight it all the way, we see examples in the media every day of women who are fighting it to the death, and they just don't look like normal, happy, natural women.
And that just increases our stress levels, and it's a vicious cycle, isn't it? Because the more stress,
it absolutely does,
we get with how we look, the more likely we age quicker and have health issues. So we've got to drop that stress and frustration, and just that there's a line between acceptance and unhealthy.
Yes.
But if we're doing all the right things, and we're nourishing ourselves, and we're doing the self-care, and we're eating well and nutritiously, and we're moving our bodies, those key pieces, if we're doing that, then we shouldn't beat ourselves up about
the way it's about finding that healthy balance for where we are in our lives at any point. And that healthy balance, I think, starts between our ears. It's head and heart and body, all of that combined. But it's so much more peaceful when we're able to reach that level of acceptance. And something I always tell my clients is, be curious. I think compassionate curiosity puts us in a place where we think, gosh, is that what's happening? Oh, that's different. Oh, I didn't notice that before, without without criticism, but with curiosity, because curiosity is the opposite of judgment. And when we can look at the story that our body is telling us about who we are and where we are in our lives now, it just becomes quite compelling. And it helps us to accept what's happening, to be curious about it, and then to accept it. And the thing about acceptance is that people think that acceptance means approval. It means that this is the best. No, it doesn't. It just means we stop fighting the fact that it's happening. Acceptance is our understanding this process of change and stopping fighting that. And then once we accept, we can think, right, how can I make this the best home it can be for me? How can I make sure that it's happy and healthy, that I'm nourishing it, that I'm moving it, that I'm keeping it in good condition? And that becomes the quest, rather than I've got to fit into my size 12. It shifts the conversation away from weight to state. And I think that mind state is just the most important thing, that accepting mind state. And awareness, it's about being aware as well when we're doing it to ourselves. I think the world's most important question is, what's the story I'm telling myself that's leading me to feel like this? Because it is always about us, whether we're comparing ourselves to other or being, we've got a friend who seems to be miraculously unchanged, or whatever it is that we're comparing ourselves to. We need to come back to that. It's our story about that. It's not that event. It's not her. It's not them. It's not the media. It's our story that we're telling us about that. And that's the thing we can change. That's the brilliant part, because if we're doing, if our stories are having those consequences for us, then we change the story. But we need to be aware of it first. So I think self-awareness is the most important life skill we can learn. And out of self-awareness, knowing ourselves deeply, being able to hear what's going on in our heads, having a good objective understanding of how the world sees us. When we have that self-awareness, we can tune into those stories and start to challenge and change them.
Yeah.
Because otherwise it just becomes about diet and exercise, and that, we know all that stuff.
Yeah,
we know all that stuff.
We can beat ourselves up about that forever, can't we? So if we go deeper and find out what's fueling that, then that's where the value is, isn't it?
Exactly. What's the story I'm telling myself that's leading me to feel like this?
And a lot of those stories come from our inner critics, don't they? You've done a lot of work on those, I'm sure, and I've come across them in some of my stuff as well, because obviously that deep stuff affects how people improve their health. So talk a little bit about what the common ones are, so that we can kind of get an understanding of what those voices are telling us.
Definitely. Well, I've identified 5 main ways in which we get in our own way and, that create these voices. And I call them my paces. And I think I may have mentioned them before on your program. And PACE is an acronym. So P is for perfectionism. And that's really about not wanting to fail. And we all, by the way, we all have all of the paces some of the time, but we have our own particular favorites. So A in paces stands for approval addiction. And that can show up in different ways as well. It's not just about, you have to pay attention to me, you have to like me, you have to think I'm lovely or beautiful or thin or whatever it is. It's equally about, I have to prioritize your needs over mine. I have to pay attention to you in order to prove my own value. So that was the version I had, which was, I must pay attention to you and I must put you first, which leads to all sorts of passive aggressive nonsense, hurt and anger when they don't reciprocate. Yeah,
that's people please a bit.
That's people pleasing. Yeah. So we've got perfectionism, we've got approval addiction. The third one is need for certainty, and that's one that really bit us quite badly during these last few years when we've had the weirdest time. When we were all sent home for 2 years virtually. Need for certainty shows up as how, when, why, where, what, who. Wanting to know you've got all the stuff in the right order, wanting to know all the steps, wanting to know that it will end well, wanting to know that you can do it. It's just wanting to know when things will happen, what will happen, how they'll happen. And again, that's one that used to be quite strong for me. And I've just managed to really let it go. I lead quite a nomadic life these days, and I don't feel that need for certainty anymore. And then the fourth one is about ease, and that is comfort zone. So, you know, we want to know that it will be safe and it won't be too hard, and that it's not going to stretch us or be too painful or too difficult. And that's it's quite a big one around the food industry and the diet industry, particularly. People fall off diets because they think it's just too hard. They make it about being deprived rather than about, moving towards this gleaming vision of how they could be and how they could feel. So ease is the fourth one. And then the fifth one is one I call self-rule. And self-rule is all about control. That's all about, I've got to do it my way. Don't tell me what to do. I need to do it when I'm ready. You'll often hear people who procrastinate saying, yes, but I do it in my own time, and I do it at the end because that gives me this great sense of pressure, and then I can get things done, So self-rule. And all of our stories, or our inner critics, as you put it, are attached to these 5 triggers, our hotspots. So it's quite useful, when I say the world's most important question, what's the story I'm telling myself? It's leading me to feel like this. You're taking responsibility for your own feelings. You're taking responsibility for the fact that something you're thinking, something you're believing, a story you're telling yourself is generating these feelings. And PACEs as a model can really help to identify what that story is. Because if you're thinking, well, I don't know what the story I'm telling myself is, you can say, okay, is it about the fact that I want to do this really well? Is it about the fact I'm afraid of going out there and failing? Or is it about the fact that actually I really want people to like this? Or is it about the fact that actually I don't know how to do it and I don't have all the right things in the right order? Or is it about the fact that it just feels really hard? Or is it about the fact that actually someone else is telling me what to do and it's pushing me in this direction and I don't want to go there? So, that as a tool can really help us to work out what the story is. Because if we don't know what the story is, what the beliefs are that are getting in our way, then we can't fix them. But when we do understand where that story's come from, we can understand ourselves a bit more and think, okay, well, I'm afraid so-and-so won't like what I'm doing here. It might be a family member, it might be a husband, it might be a friend, or a girlfriend or whatever. They are pushing me down this path, or I want their approval. Okay, that's what's upsetting me. That's why I'm getting in my own way here. And it just really helps us, because once we understand where it's coming from, we can challenge it, we can change it, we can adjust the story, we can influence the situation. We can't always change the situation, but we should be able to influence it if we're part of it. So again, it's just all comes down to that self-awareness and knowing ourselves in depth and being able to tune into what I call the inner radio.
What do you think in your work? What are out of the things you've talked about mostly sabotage women in being more healthy?
I think low self-worth, insecurity, hanging on to messages we've absorbed in the past, rightly or wrongly, interpreted the right way or the wrong way. And the thing about self-worth is I get so many people coming to me, my clients, typically in our story session at the beginning, where they tell me from cradle to now, everything they've been through. What comes up so often is self-doubt, self-criticism, low self-worth. Even with surprisingly senior people, and they want to fix that. They'll come to me saying, right, I want to work on my self-worth, and it takes a little while for them to understand that self-worth, you can't work on self-worth. So all of these coaches will say to you, book a spa day, go and do something nice for yourself. Yeah, that's really nice. But self-worth isn't something that we can fix from the outside, because it's a consequence. And the analogy I use, and I've been using this for years, I ought to find a more elegant one really, is it's like when you go into your kitchen every morning and the floor is wet. So you get the mop and you dry the floor. But the problem isn't that the floor is wet. The problem is that the radiator's leaking. So self-worth is a wet floor. And what's causing it is a certain type of belief that we hold that is the most damaging and toxic of the beliefs. And those are the musts. I must be thinner. I must not have this belly. I must not look worse than that person. My family must pay attention to me. And the problem with the musts is, A, they're irrational, because the world doesn't work like that. But B, they come with an or else. I must be thin. or else.
No one will
And
love
the
me.
or else's are deadly, or else it's really bad, or else I can't stand it, or else I'm not good enough. So we attach our value to what we think has to happen or has to not happen, how we think we should be or the world should be. So it's those are the most damaging of our beliefs. And that's low self-worth probably arrives through the messages we absorb in childhood from those around us, but we perpetuate it as adults by attaching our value to what we think must or must not happen. So that's the main work that I do with my clients, is teaching them how to hear what's going on.
And if you have low self-worth, that will mean that you're not going to be feel yourself worthy of a healthy body.
Absolutely.
Is that how it works?
Yeah. You don't believe that you're worth it, and you also don't believe you can. You don't believe it's for you. Even if you want it on some level, you really want it. It's a demand, I must not be the way I am. I must be something else. And it is, we're damaging our own value all the time. So there is part of us that actually doesn't believe it's possible for us, or that we deserve it. Because nice things like that don't happen to people like us.
And that's so hard to override, isn't it? That's just so strong.
Well, it's very strong, but it can happen in an instant, because when people suddenly realize, so I'm doing this to myself just because I think in terms of those musts. And when I show them how to think in a different way, which isn't positive thinking, by the way, I'm not a subscriber to this positive thinking movement, because I think it's irrational. Again, I don't think the world works like that. It doesn't always give us what we want, shit happens, excuse my language. So what I do is I teach people how to think in a practical way, which is when we're making a demand, it means that we want it. This must happen. This mustn't happen. I must be like this. I mustn't be like this. We want that thing. So I can't say to people, don't want that. It's about wanting it in a much more realistic way. So I might say we might rebuild that belief. So let's take a very simple one. I must be thin. I must lose weight, or else it's really bad and I can't stand it. And it makes me a rubbish person. So let's take that, I must lose weight. Okay, let's think in a realistic way. I'd really prefer to lose weight. I really want to lose weight, but I accept that I may not. And if I don't lose weight, it's not the end of the world, and it doesn't mean I'm a bad person. Having acknowledged that I do want to lose weight, right, how can I help myself to make it happen? How can I really support myself to make it happen? So it moves you into a much more pragmatic space. Instead of saying, I must, or mustn't. No, it's like, okay, I acknowledge that I'd really like to, but I also acknowledge that it doesn't have to happen. Well, given that I want it, how can I help myself? What can I do to help myself? There's no beating yourself up there. There's no or else. There's just an acceptance of what you want, and an acceptance of how the world works, and a desire to support yourself to make it happen. So it's subtle, but it takes out those or else's. You don't attach, or else it's really bad, or else I'm rubbish. There's none of that goes on. So rewiring it becomes easier, because you've got a process to follow that actually changes the belief. And when you change the belief, you change the consequences, you change the outcome. And it's about having the self-awareness to realize when that little sneaky or else I'm not good enough is still cropping in, because it's a neural pathway that you've developed for years. It's a habit you've had for years. And your brain, in some irrational way, thinks it's saving your life by giving you those messages you've spent years embedding. So that can take, a little while, but actually the flip, the transformation happens as soon as you realize you're doing it to yourself, and that it's the stories you're telling yourself that is causing it. And it's as simple as that. And then what you need is a process to tune in, and a process to adjust, to challenge and change that story.
That just takes so much weight and pressure and stress off the whole process, doesn't it? Knowing that you're not attached to the outcome. you're just accepting and wanting. I think that's
Yeah,
just so transformational, that, Caroline. It really is.
it is. It lowers the stakes, because when you're saying, I must lose weight or else I'm not good enough, the stakes are about as high as they can be. And that can create all sorts of problems for us, because, it is irrational and we're not giving ourselves any out, and it's almost impossible to achieve. So when we fail, which we will repeatedly do, that's the whole diet industry is based around the fact that we will repeatedly fail. That's how they make their money. When we repeatedly fail, that "or else I'm not good enough" is just being ground into us. So in the end, we will not believe it's possible. Whereas if we're thinking, actually, I would like to lose weight because this is my home and I want it to be the best home it can be, I acknowledge that it might not happen for me. And if it doesn't, that's not the end of the world, but I can adjust my thinking around that. But given that I do want it, how can I support myself to make it happen in the most compassionate way that I can? And a lot of that is going to be around having support, having the right messaging around us, having the right boundaries around us. But it starts as this inside game for us. It starts with being able to hear when we're doing it to ourselves.
This stuff to me is like 99% of what you need when you want to try and lose some weight. It's like you can't do it without this piece really sustainably, can you?
No, you can't.
Being...
And that's the word, sustainably. You can't. You can have a little, a good couple of weeks where you lose half a stone if you're lucky, but it just gets harder and harder as our bodies, we were talking earlier, they just become more stubborn and hanging on to it. And there must be a reason for that. But yeah, it is, and it's a lifelong path. Self-acceptance is a lifelong path, as is self-awareness.
We keep having to do this work, don't we, really, just to
had
years and years and years of the other stuff.
They have. But the great news is that we can change it. We can change what we do to ourselves.
Yes,
and that changes everything.
Yeah. I just want to finish up on some practical tips that people can take from this that they can use in their everyday life. I mean, you've talked about some amazing ones, but what are some sort of very quick, simple techniques that you'd be happy to share with us today to help them?
Well, I will give you a couple. So the first one is really to ask yourself that question, which I call the world's most important question. And the trigger is when you feel bad. So anything other than positive or in equilibrium, when you feel emotionally, when you feel hurt, ashamed, angry, anxious, any of those guilty, envious, any of those big, difficult, uncomfortable emotions, that is the flag to ask yourself the question, what's the story I'm telling myself about the situation that's leading me to feel like this? And it interrupts that story, and it moves you from a place of feeling, which is, in a very primitive part of your brain, the amygdala, to prefrontal cortex, what I call your dragon mindset, your wise, adult, solution-focused, creative dragon mindset. And it moves you, from emotion into being a creative, solution-focused, rational adult person. So that question, what is the story I'm telling myself about this situation that is leading me to feel like this? And you're taking responsibility for how you feel. And once you understand the story, you can challenge and change it. So that would be, I would say, be the most important tip. And then the second one is, we talked about values earlier. There is the Barrett Values Center online. I think it used to be free. There's an assessment, but I think now it's about $20 or something. Anyway, it's not a lot, but it's really worth doing. Go and do the exercise, the Barrett Values Center, and really learn about what is important to you. And for me, there were 5 things. In fact, there were loads of things, but they all came down to 5 themes. And the first one was love, and the second one is say is honor, and there are a few others. But when you understand what your values are, you can come up with your own tools to help you. So it's useful to have a phrase or a question or a statement that you can use for yourself when you feel wobbly, when you fall over, when you have a moment of weakness, when you think this is too hard. It can be useful to have a statement or a question that taps into your strongest values and reminds you of who you are. So for me, I mentioned that honor was a really strong one, and that's about truth, it's about respect, it's about honesty and integrity. So I decided at the beginning of lockdown a couple of years ago now that I was going to walk every day, regardless of weather. I was just going to walk every day. And that was really about my mental health, because I moved in with my parents to look after them during lockdown. They're in their 80s in a small house, and I was wondering how I was going to get through it. So I thought, right, my therapy is there's a big beach 2 miles down the road, and I'm going to walk on that thing. And we're talking east coast of Scotland, so horizontal sleet in the winter. And for the first few weeks, I didn't always feel like it. I started in the winter, and it seemed to rain every day. But I had a mantra. So given that honor is so important to me, and honesty and truth and keeping promises is so important to me, my mantra was, today is not the day I break my promise to myself. And if I looked out the window and I even started to think, I would just say, today is not the day I break my promise to myself. And that is always accompanied by an action, which was putting my shoes on. So I would say that thing, and immediately the attached action was putting my shoes on and getting whatever water. I ended up buying all the gear. So and I inevitably felt, and it was 1 mile. All I had to do was walk 1 mile. And always, almost every single time, I would find that as I was approaching the mile, I didn't want to stop. Whatever the weather was, it was just being outside was so exhilarating, moving my legs, getting the blood flowing, how it made me feel, breathing in fresh air was so exhilarating that I just wanted to keep going. So I walked 2,000 miles during lockdowns on that beach. And interestingly, it wasn't the objective, but I lost 1 pound every 10 days.
Oh my word.
I just lost 1 pound every 10 days because, and it became so important to me. And a mile is 20 minutes, it's a fast walk, 20 minutes. And by the end of the first month, I think I was walking 3-4 miles a day and enjoying it so much. Wearing, it was very expensive in terms of beach wellies, I can tell you, because I wore through so many pairs. But find something that hooks into your values and build a statement or a question around it, and then attach an action to that. And that action is full of intent. So if it's about food, that action is to go and have a glass of water instead of a fizzy drink, or to clear a cupboard of stuff that you shouldn't, or to not buy. I mean, the point of buying is the danger point, isn't it? In the supermarket, is to go with a list, and a meal plan. That's going to help you keep on track, because if you don't have that guidance, like a roadmap, isn't it? If you don't have that roadmap, you're going to get lost. So find a statement or a question. And as I say, mine was, today is not the day I break my promise to myself. And that got me right in the heart. That absolutely got me out of my chair and into my shoes and my coat and out the door. So find something like that.
And it is that first step, isn't it? It is that, okay, I love the fact as well that you made that goal so small initially. You said, right, I'm just going to walk a mile. I mean, I know that's may not be accessible to everyone, but make that goal really small to start with. And then it's the starting it that's so hard, isn't it? It's the anticipation and the, I don't feel like it today. But once you're doing it, it's so much easier, isn't it?
Absolutely. And there are little things that we can do. So if you want to exercise, and you choose that morning is going to be your exercise time, put your exercise clothes on the floor next to your bed. So when you get out of bed, you stand on them, so it's much easier to prepare that the night before rather than in the morning. Another great little tip actually is to tell yourself while you're in bed in the morning what kind of day you want to have. So you're lying in bed thinking, right, today my day is going to be getting things done, or today my day is about going to be taking exercise, or today my day is going to be about looking after my home for the rest of my life, my miraculous body. And the second that my foot hits the floor, I am living that. I'm living it. And just ramp up the energy of that thought. It's no good lying in bed thinking, oh, I want to have a day of energy. You've got to think in the way that you want to be and tell yourself, when my foot hits the floor, that physical cue of arriving in my day, bam, that's it. I'm living it. I'm feeling it. And you can give yourself little details like, today my day is about creating energy for my body, like eating 4 kinds of, vegetable before lunchtime or whatever. Be specific. Give yourself small, specific goals that you can reach.
Yeah.
But it's about that combination of preparing your mind and telling your body and the physical cue of hitting the floor. And then immediately taking action. Immediately. Don't leave it for an hour. Don't go and have a hot bath for an hour and think about it, because
Or
the
go on
energy
your
will just
phone.
drain away. Exactly.
That's the worst thing to
Exactly.
do, because the phone has a million distractions and you'll forget what you're supposed to be.
Absolutely.
We have another tip in the 30-day program, which we have your mindset videos in there, which is so important. We have the entry level, which is the just starting with a smoothie a day.
Yes. Yes.
That is just one thing you have to do, and they taste amazing. It's not difficult to drink, but just getting into that habit of just creating that smoothie first thing, it can make a huge difference. And that's why we start with just do that thing. Don't worry about anything else. Just do that. And get the ingredients ready. You can have your bottle ready, put all the ingredients in the night before.
Absolutely.
And just add your liquid first thing in the morning and you're done.
Absolutely.
And not only start physically well, but you start mentally well, because you're getting those nutrients in the brain, but you're also starting with a really healthy mindset that you've done this amazing thing. And the rest of your day should follow suit, because you've done a really nourishing.
You've had a win. You've had a win.
Exactly.
Yes. And I completely agree with you about, I have a green smoothie every morning, and I haven't for the last 3 mornings because I build mine around kale, and I've just driven 860 miles and haven't been able to find anything other than a whole load of fruit to put in my smoothie. And I don't really want to start with that massive sugar hit. So I'm missing it. I'm really missing it. So after this, I'm going to go out and get myself some greens. So I can, but preparing it the night before, it's just so easy to go to the fridge, add your liquid, whiz it up, and you're there. Anything you can do the night before to help you prepare is great. Even write out a little card that you put by your bed, telling yourself, this is what I'm going to do tomorrow, and this is how I'm going to feel tomorrow. And you're going into sleep with that intention. It all helps.
It's all about making it easier for yourself, isn't it? And making it easier for that voice to not dominate everything. The other thing I like is just, actually, I wake up every morning at the moment, just kind of, I think it was one of a celebrity on Instagram who told me just to smile when you wake up actually makes a huge difference to your mind. You're telling your mind that you're happy to be here and ready to face the day. And the other thing for me is just practicing a bit of gratitude instead of criticism. So when I start criticizing my body, I try and then flip it to be grateful for something else. So it might be, I don't like the belly at the moment, but I'm really grateful for my legs because they work and they enable me to walk and I'm strong. So there's always something to be grateful for, always.
Definitely. I mean, gratitude, actually, the studies they've done on it is incredible. It helps people live longer. People who have a regular practice of gratitude, their cells look different. They're less ill. They certainly live longer, and they're happier on any happiness measurement. They are happier people. So it's really worthwhile, and it rewires us to start looking at life in a different way, in a much more accepting way, and in a way that is appreciative rather than critical, rather than fearful. So definitely.
Well, I'm very grateful for you, Caroline, to come today and talk to us about this super important topic, because it is everything, and it's not only physical longevity and how we age, but how happy we are when we do that. So I'm really grateful for you to do this work. I'm going to put all the links of where people can find you underneath. Is there anything you want to finish up on, anything that we've missed today that you'd like to finish on?
I think we've pretty much covered it. I think, that compassionate curiosity, I'd like to come back to that again, along with gratitude. When we find ourselves criticizing an aspect of our bodies, just be curious about it and be kind to ourselves while we're being curious. And that can help to ease out the judgment. And if we do that often enough, when we hear ourselves being critical, it can start to rewire how we look at ourselves. So yeah, compassionate curiosity and self-awareness and acceptance.
Lovely. Well, that's a great one to end on. Thank you so much again, and I hopefully will speak to you soon. Take care.
And thank you for inviting me. I've really enjoyed it. Thanks, Nikki.
Take care.